Hi, guys. I'm Jarek Naylor, and this is Partially Impartial. I want to thank our listeners for tuning in to our weekend show. Remember to hook us up with a like or subscribe to support our new and growing channel. We'll probably have a bit of a shorter show for you guys tonight. We're going to settle on a more consistent date going forward from here. We'll probably do our long shows every Wednesday night, and we'll have the COVID update on there, and then we'll plan on doing a shorter show here and there as topics come up of just whatever miscellaneous thing we feel like covering at that time. And we've got a full house this show. We've got the whole crew here this time. So thanks for joining us, CJ, Sheldon, and Justin.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Glad to be here.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me again.
So a lot has been happening lately. I know I've been keeping a really close eye on the protests and all that going on. I pretty much about 7 or 8 o'clock every night, I pull those up and just see what's going on, hoping that I can see something crazy. And I know 2 nights ago, I was just casually watching and saw this lady get shot basically live on camera. Went back, watched it over a couple times. Really crazy. That was in... what's the place with that Rayshard Brooks? Do you guys know what place that was at?
I thought it was Atlanta.
Atlanta, Georgia? I think so. I think that's it. But yeah, a lot of crazy stuff going on there. It definitely seems like shit's getting pretty intense there. There was like several bouts of gunfire going off there, so I'm glad I'm not there. But and then we've also had a Trump rally yesterday. Huge crowd. Well, I don't know, huge, but more people than should be gathering during a pandemic was there, and obviously no masks or anything like that. The way I would imagine going to a Trump rally would be you probably wouldn't want to be seen wearing a mask. You'd probably feel like the odd man out because his followers seem to be on more of the denial side of things. But and then we're also having a pretty big spike in numbers globally and in the U.S. right now. I'll kind of leave out the whole COVID update this time, but I did want to say in Utah, we're breaking record almost every day of our new daily cases. So it really seems like we're entering into the next leg of this, which is something that we've talked about a lot on this show. So do you guys think that with all this going on, and I know there was the funeral that happened as well for George Floyd, and it seems like people are kind of starting to think that this whole pandemic is over. How do you guys feel about all that?
Well, I mean, when it really comes down to it, like we were discussing before the show, we've been having, protests coming up to, 1 month right now, as well as, places starting to reopen and, the Trump rallies and protests. And with all that, like we were kind of saying before a couple weeks back, within the, a 2 week to 1 month period, we were going to probably end up seeing a spike in cases. And it's kind of like globally, we're starting to see these spikes in cases. And it's kind of funny because they're ignoring, or a lot of people are ignoring the face masks or the social distancing. And it's kind of like, if everybody's going to gather and we're going to, try to stand up for something that's right, then it's obviously the best way to do it is to do it smart and not get everybody sick in the process. But it's pretty unfortunate that we're seeing all these cases start to spike.
Yeah, and we haven't seen the death rate really start to catch up yet, and there's a lot of different reasons why that could be. I think there's probably a combination of different things, actually. Like, first and foremost, we're increasing our testing, so we're likely catching more of the non-serious cases, and we're also improving our treatment methods with the virus. So we're probably getting pretty good at making sure that people don't die. And
well, because that's the thing right now, hospitals aren't overwhelmed. We're getting back to we were at a level point where things were starting to settle out, or at least from what the general public's eye was getting.
But I mean, like, wasn't that always the real big concern and why we shut down is because we didn't want the hospitals to overfill? And like now we're at this point where we just finally slowed down and now it's making this huge resurgence. And I don't know, it seems weird. Like on the 18th, that was Thursday, the governor of California issued that mandatory order that everybody in the state's supposed to wear masks. And I was at the beach all day. I had no idea. And there was a ton of people there and no one had a mask on. And I was out at lunch today and got lunch before we did this, and no one had a mask in the stores. And, yeah, but I mean, I'm in Orange County, and it's a little more Republican than the most of Southern California in general. But even after the governor issued the warning, people aren't taking it that seriously, and we're definitely starting to see spikes here too in the new cases.
And there's no punishment for not wearing a mask right now. I mean, it's not like, you can go around arresting everybody or handing out tickets or anything, but, it's one of those things where it's like, government order, but not, being taken very, very lightly.
Right. Well, there's not really much you could do. I mean, if you start arresting people for not wearing a mask, you're gonna start more protests. You know, like for just freedom in general, people not being able to do as they please. I mean, yeah, it's smart to wear a mask. Oh, you're good. Even though it's smart to wear a mask, at the same time, it's like you got to let people allow natural selection to take its course. Um, just saying.
Hey, Justin, out of curiosity, since that's happened, have there been any protests that have popped up for people protesting the order?
Not a big protest, but people have been going to city halls all over Orange County specifically and like really letting the city council have it. Like coming in and reading off false science and just a bunch of people behind them clapping. I mean, it's pretty hilarious. But
And Orange County was one of the first to lift their order,
yeah,
right?
yeah, because a lot of people here were just over it. I mean, in Orange County, even when the cities were making masks and social distancing mandatory, like the police didn't even care enough to enforce it. You could walk right past them if you're trying to go to the beach, and they'd kind of just laugh, like, "Yeah, this fucking thing's stupid." So it's like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely seen a large resurgence of false science. Definitely, it's really crazy, and it's crazy how accurate they can make it sound, and it's really frustrating coming from my point of view, who really looked into this, to just come up against something that really comes off as so true or so possibly true. Because if you don't really know the details, then you're going to read that, and then you're going to repeat that to as many people as possible. And with the masks, yeah, I think that would be incredibly difficult here in the U.S. to make that a law. I don't even know how you would enforce something like that. I know in a lot of other countries, they really have basically made it so you have to wear a mask, and that's the number one thing that you could do to actually make this problem much better. And I remember what I was going to say. With the deaths, we likely, I mean, we are starting to see some hospitals get overwhelmed. I know in Houston and in Arizona and in Florida, they're starting to have some real problems with the hospital capacity. I think that'll be the one main thing that will decide whether we close down or not, which I know is a huge, would be like, it would be a bigger decision to close down the second time than I think it would be the first time, because people are so irritated. But
Oh, imagine the backlash.
oh yeah, yeah. People would just not be happy with it, you know. And
Not only that, but like the economy hasn't even recovered from the first shutdown. If we do it again, I mean, it's bad stuff. That'd be a real big decision.
Not to mention, we're just about to be done with that whole stimulus, and people getting the extra $600 a month or a week for unemployment, and that's supposed to end at the end of July. So we're gonna hopefully see an end, like that spike in unemployment drop. But then again, as all these people start going back to work, then all of a sudden, if you throw a shutdown in their face, they're going to be like, what the hell? You guys are, promoting a fake virus, or like, is this thing real? Is this thing fake? Is it a big deal? Like, you basically, I mean, like I've mentioned a million times before, you've like, once you lose that fear factor, you've essentially lost any chance of, having a control on how to delegate what people do, or how people react to this virus.
Yeah, and speaking on the fact of like, is it a big deal or not, and some of the fake science that's been coming out, I know that I think I shared it with our group chat that we have, but Jarek, you responded to it with basically some report saying that the potency of the virus has decreased. Is that one of those things that you're seeing as fake science? Because I haven't done enough research, honestly, to really delve into that. But that just came to mind just now, and I wondered if maybe you had done anything, or if any of you guys have heard anything about the potency not being as great now, and that people aren't dying at the same rate that they were during the lockdown.
So I think that is holding up. I mean, like today and the past days that we've had, we're getting over 20,000 cases a day in the U.S., but yet we're seeing like 500, or did I say, yeah, over 20,000 cases, and we're seeing under about 500 deaths. But before, when we were getting 20 or 30,000, we were getting like 2,500 or 3,000 deaths. So, and I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why that could be. It could just be we're catching more of the non-serious cases. We're actually picking up on them, and maybe we were missing a ton back then. And like I said, it could be because we're getting better at curing the disease. And it could, I think I brought this up a little bit. If it was manipulated in a lab, then it could not be very well suited for a real world environment. This is just a total hypothesis from Chris Martenson, nothing really backing it. But if it was, made to be stronger in a lab and then put into a real world environment, there may be some little glitch in there that makes it so it doesn't have the longevity that it would normally have if it was a naturally occurring thing. So there's a lot of unknown around that, but it does seem around the whole world that we're seeing an increase in cases, but not necessarily an increase in deaths. So it could be possible. And maybe it's like a summer thing. Maybe for some reason in the summer it's less lethal. I don't know. There's a lot of unknown around that.
You also have to look into the likelihood of a possibility of it mutating, especially with it not being something that's naturally occurring. You were talking about how it may not be made for such a human environment and like a global environment, but then there's also a possibility that it's almost made too good to where it will learn how to adapt, just like we have our flu that we come out with a new case of flu every couple of years, and they have to find a new flu shot every couple of years, and it's kind of a guess and check game on what's gonna work or whatnot. But there's definitely a possibility that something like that could happen. And I've been reading as well that they've looked into a lot of cases that have been popping up lately have even been people in their 20s and 30s, which is kind of ironic if you think about the protests that have been going on. You don't see people in their 50s and 60s out in these protests. They're mostly people from 18 years old to their 30s.
That is an interesting theory. It could
Yeah.
be that maybe we're seeing a lot of younger cases, and those people are having an easier time with it.
Yeah, because it's not like we see an age
Exactly.
range on the people that are being tested and coming back positive, right? So,
Yeah, not at all.
but who knows? 2020 could be the test year, and 2021 could be the real deal. We're going to get the more potent virus next year.
Yeah.
COVID
COVID 20.
2.0.
coming from you at all angles globally
Coming to a world near you.
this winter.
Yeah. So before we get into some of these, there's been a lot of military conflicts happening, and it seemed like they all happened like all around each other. So that's why I think they're all notable. But before we touch on all of those, We were talking about an interesting topic here before the show started about possibly an independent party gaining some sort of steam, maybe this election or maybe elections going forward from here. It really seems like this whole two-party thing is just so blatantly not working for so many people. Was there anything you guys had to say about that, or any candidates that you think would be a good option other than Trump or Biden?
Any
I've
of
been
them?
looking heavily any of them. I've been looking at JoJo personally. I I like her mostly middle ground views, on basically everything. She's not overly uh, going. Uh, like I like that she is still small government because I do like that about the right wing side, but at the same time she supports basic health care for everyone. I think that that's a human right. Everybody deserves to have access to health care, and um, whether they pay for it or not, that it's something that they can get access to. I mean, that's a huge thing for me personally because I adopted my son from foster care, and I when we started fostering him, like I went from me and my wife at the time both working to her having to quit her job to stay home with our son and going off of one income for a while, and that kind of hit us hard. And the fact that because he was a foster child and he's taken care of by the state, he qualifies for Medicaid, or Medicare. And so even after we've adopted him now, he he'll be covered under Medicare until he's 18. And I think that, like, for most people that can't afford healthcare, that's so super important because, like, we don't have to worry about taking him to the doctor and whether we have $500 in our bank account to pay for an emergency room visit, or do we have the money for a copay to take him to the doctor to be seen for this or that. We shouldn't have to worry about how much money we have to be able to take care of our own health and our own needs. um, so I that's one of the things that she's very for. I know that the Democrats are about that too, but at the same time, they're just like, there's so many other things that they're fighting about, and it's just a joke. So I don't know. I'm looking at her. Those are one of the big reasons. I'm also looking at her heavily because she's not a rapist or a racist. So there's that
And
too.
she is actually running this year,
She
correct?
is running this year, yeah. So JoJo, I don't know what her last name is. I
She's
just know her by
libertarian, right?
JoJo. Libertarian, yeah.
Joe Joe Jorgensen.
Yeah, JoJo Jorgensen, that's it.
Yeah, I think it's Jorgensen. Yeah.
I agree with a lot of libertarian viewpoints. I'm sorry, real quick, but I don't know if a libertarian's going to be able to make it on the ticket. I think if it's going to be anyone independent, it would probably be someone who's like popular and has some celebrity and not a politician. But I definitely agree with a lot of libertarian viewpoints. I will say that.
No, I've honestly been looking into, the high possibility that not this election, because I do have a very, very strong feeling that just Biden's going to win this election just because of the Trump hate, and we'll have to deal with the Democrat and deal with the two-party system for another couple of years. But in a sense, we have like a record number of people registering to vote right now. A lot of them are going, Green Party, Independent Party, and a Libertarian Party. A lot of them are starting to mix it up, and I think, as unfortunate as it sounds, like as we have a lot of these baby boomers start to die off, we're going to have a lot of Republicans that aren't going to be around anymore, and we're going to have a lot of these new voters that are going to really want a change in the system, because generally speaking, it's a lot of these younger people that want something to be different and are kind of fed up with the bullshit and fed up with this two-party system that gets us absolutely nowhere but back and forth. We go one direction, because we get a Republican for 4 years or 8 years, and then we get stuck with the Democrat the next time, and then we go a completely different direction for 8 years and spend 8 years going that other direction, and then somebody else gets voted in, and then all that shit gets taken down. It's just like this back and forth ping pong brigade that gets us absolutely nowhere. And I think
what a schizophrenic way to run a fucking society.
for
Jesus.
real, it's like okay, where are we getting? Where have we gotten? Nowhere. Like all the things that have happened generally have happened from because of a global issue. Like things like Corona and shit like that. They're gonna happen, and they're gonna fuck with the economy. It's gonna you're gonna have that, and you're gonna have countries at war. You're gonna have trade tariffs and shit like that to deal with. But all in all, when it comes down to it, you kind of need people in house that are general, down to earth, logical thinking people. When you're stuck with a bunch of idiots and fucking, I mean, to put it lightly, a bunch of senile, old, semi-veterans, semi-fucking retired, should be in retirement home on hospice people. like let's clear it out. Like, let's put some fucking life into it. Like, wouldn't it be nice to, hell, like, places like Canada and Sweden and shit, they get into fights in their parliaments and their in their Congress and shit. I'd love to see people get so hyped up and so pissed off that, like, let's actually stand for something. Right now, it's just this government that we've built upon, who has more money and who's going to pay the most money to get what they want done.
Yeah. I think that, like, personally, there's two quotes that are by Albert Einstein that I think go really well with what you said about the going back and forth of, like, voting for one party or the other and expecting change. And that's, first off, we doing the same thing over and over is insanity. That's not the exact quote by Albert Einstein, but it's something that he essentially
And
said.
doing the same thing over
And
and over and expecting a different
result.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Yep, expecting a different result. And that's the definition of insanity. The other thing is, another quote that he said is that we can't solve our problems today with the same thinking we used to create them. And that's exactly what we're doing with just about everything, is that we continue to try and solve the problems with the same thinking that we used when we created them, and we're not getting anywhere. And I really feel like we need to elect a candidate that isn't so far one way or the other way, somebody that is actually closer to middle ground, that is actually going to do what they say about being able to work between the two aisles. I feel like we should have a small middle party that exists in the Senate and the House too. We don't need all this black and white politics. It's just going to continue to divide us more and more and more. I think that the more that we have people that agree with, yeah, there's something on this side that makes sense, and there's something on this side that makes sense. But if we continue to have more and more people be on one side or the other, there's always going to be a clash. There's always going to be fighting. We're never going to get anywhere. And this country's going to fail, honestly. I mean, it's exactly what I think it was Alexander Hamilton that said it in the past about warning us about a two-party system. It was one of the founding fathers that did. I can't remember exactly who right now, but they said that having a two-party system would create a divide in this country greater than what we would be able to solve, and that's what we're seeing today. And it's been growing for who knows how long. I don't even know when these parties started, to be completely honest with you. I don't know that my history that well enough.
A long time. They've been around. Yeah, they've been
Yeah,
around
long
since
ass
almost the
time.
beginning.
Yeah.
I'm kind of just taking a guess here, but it seems like they weren't so divided maybe like 30, 40, 50 years ago. There was the whole two-party thing going on, but it seems like the people in power have just really figured out this divide and conquer equation, and they just got it mastered so well. You see it creeping out in every little news conference, press conference, every little thing the president says, everything Joe Biden says. It's just like so specifically designed for them to capitalize more and more off of the division that they're creating. And they divide so that way we don't really come to an agreement on any real change, like anything that would really maybe lower the wealth inequality gap, something that 99% of Americans agree on, but yet it's just not going to happen because the people in power are in control of these two parties who sometimes I swear they just pretend to be opposing. So that way it creates this back and forth thing, but really there's some sort of unified agenda between both of them, but they kind of just pretend to be an opposing force, so that way people have something to hate. That's just something I've thought. I don't know that for a fact or anything, but it seems like there's some truth to that. And like with this election that we're coming up on now, I think there's so many people that were so hurt by the last election, with Hillary losing, especially with how the odds were so stacked in her favor, and people were just so shocked about her losing, and especially to Trump. Like people that Hillary has talked so much shit on, and everyone's painted him as this horrible, awful, evil, bad guy, and then when they lost, they were just so devastated. And I think they've been carrying around that trauma basically for the past 4 years. And then now that this next election is coming up, they don't care who it is. They just want revenge basically for that lost election. And that's kind of why it's almost like with the independent party, which I think they do have a good fighting chance, but yet people are basically trained to believe that if you vote independent, you're basically letting the other side win.
Yeah, I was taught that if you vote independent, you're throwing your vote away. I mean, that's even something that they taught us in school. I don't know if you ever heard that, Justin, but even in high school, like growing up, it was just like one of those things where it was like either you're a Democrat or Republican. You could go the other way, but it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. I think at the end of the day, the two parties aren't even that different, because no matter what happens, like the wealthy get wealthier and our taxes go up, or they end up printing more money, which is basically just us paying taxes because we're going to have to pay that money off later. I mean, like neither party really services us that well. They give us a lot of things that seem like change and they seem like progress, but what real change or progress do we have? We're all struggling still, and the wealth inequality has just grown exponentially.
All right, so it sounds like we were having a little bit of technical difficulties there, but we got everyone back in. So we'll just go ahead and move on to these articles I got covering all these military conflicts, and we'll go from there. So the first one I want to touch on here, these all kind of happened around the same time, so it really got us all like worried because normally you don't see so many. I mean, every once in a while you see one of these anomalies pop up and it's like, oh, why did that happen? Why did that ship get blown up or something? But then all of these kind of happen at the same time. And, we're in a really high tension time right now. A lot of countries are not doing so well with the whole coronavirus thing, with borders all being shut down, trade being really limited. So tensions are high, money's being printed like crazy. People are getting the raw end of the deal. Some people are actually getting richer. And so it's just really creating this whole environment. And it's not like we were all getting along before this either. So now it's kind of everything's just added up even more. So, something we've talked about is, potential civil war, potential World War III. We just like to keep an open mind to all these different possibilities as we go into, this really tense time. So, this first one here, the title says U.S. fighter jets intercept Russian bombers off of Alaska, and it sounds like they've done this multiple times now, where Russian bombers have attempted to cross into our country here. I'm not sure if they're just testing us. That's kind of how I would see it, is maybe they're like just testing to see what we would do. Like, oh, if we send a plane here, like, how do they respond? Like how many, what kind of capabilities do they have to try and stop us? So let me just read a little bit of this article here, and then I want to get your opinion on it. your guys' opinion on it. So it said U.S. fighter jets intercepted 2 pairs of Russian bomber aircraft off the Alaskan coast for the second time within a week. North American Aerospace Defense Command Center said in a statement Wednesday, 2 F-22 Raptors backed by a refueling plane and an early warning aircraft intercepted 2 separate formations of the Russian aircraft. The first consisted of 2 Tu-95 bombers accompanied by 2 Su-35 fighter jets, as well as Russian early warning aircraft, while the second was comprised of 2 bombers and the early warning aircraft. I'm not exactly sure what an early warning aircraft is. The Russian planes came within 36 miles of Alaska, but remained within international airspace. And then this is, it says for the 8th time this year, Russian military aircraft have penetrated our Canadian or Alaskan air defense identification zones, and each and every time NORAD forces were ready to meet the challenge. So it sounds like we've been really persistent at coming to meet them as they're crossing. But what do you guys think? Do you think they're just trying to push our buttons?
So to be clear about this too, this is something that has actually gone on for years. The Russian military and government have pushed demonstrations up near that area for a long time. Now, I don't know what the average is every year, but it's just been kind of a flex that's been happening for quite some time. Um, Honestly, because of the relations that Trump has with Putin, I don't think that there's any war imminent. I believe it's just flexing. But at the same time, I mean, 6 months in a year. I mean, it's almost 2 a month. So, like, it's like, okay, why? I guess is the
Yeah, like
question.
do they have a bomb? And like, if we didn't check them, then do they have a target?
Yeah. Are they? I don't know. Like, maybe we should just let them creep over a little bit further to just see, like, where they go. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, historically, if they're like we kind of mentioned the possibility of civil war, historically there has been intervention by another country during any given civil war. I mean, for example, what we call the Revolutionary War was a civil war for Britain, right? And who intervened in that war with the revolutionaries? The French. I mean, they literally helped turn the tide of the war. Honestly, um, you also have Ukraine when they had when I don't know if it's still going on. I know there's still some unrest, but when it was really bad, like 6 or so years ago, um, maybe less than that, but Russia was clearly involved, helping the side of I think I can't remember if it was the rebellion side or if it was the Ukrainian government side. I think it was the rebellion side because I don't think that Russia really cares for Ukraine. They just want to own it, just like they want to, get their land back that they lost in this when the Soviet Union fell. But but yeah, historically, there's always been another country that's kind of like intervened in some way to help one side or the other in some kind of civil war. And I don't know what Russia would do if we ended up going into a civil war. I don't know what countries would get involved. Honestly, if we did get into a civil war, I'd be very scared to see which countries get involved and which side they choose to get involved on, because whatever side gets involved and whatever side wins based on the side that gets involved kind of shows where some of the ties and the quote unquote sugar daddies are going to be after that. Um, so yeah.
So, all right, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. We've got quite a bit here. I know, CJ, you just touched on a couple of them that I have articles here for, but I want to touch on probably some of the most devastating news that I've heard so far. Just absolute catastrophe that's happened. I don't know if you guys have heard of this particular one, but 7-Eleven actually canceled their free Slurpee day.
Oh man, literally the end of the world. I think that was even in Revelations, like in the Bible, like that was going to happen. Yeah, I think it was something about there being a cold day in hell
Yeah. Oh yeah.
because Slurpees are cold, right? So
A
I don't
Slurpee
know.
free day in hell.
A Slurpee free year.
All right. Okay. But they actually are giving away the Slurpees. It's just on a different day. So if you want to go get them when you can. But anyway, moving on to.
By the way, 7-Eleven is not sponsoring this episode.
Hey, we'll all go get some free Slurpees, and then we'll feel like we're sponsored by them.
That's right.
But let's see here. I definitely want to touch on this one here. There was a clash between militaries in India and China. It's really weird situation. It sounds like it kind of sounds like they've been having this border dispute in the somewhere in the Himalayan mountains. And it sounds like tension has just been building there and building, and both sides have just been getting a little petty and just trying to get on each other's nerves. And there's been so much tension there that both sides decided, we're just not going to give any of these guys guns. I'm sure they just got like radios and stuff so they can like call back to base if some side's pushing forward, if they see anything. But because they didn't give them any guns, they did actually clash. The article here says they started hand-to-hand combat that lasted hours on a steep, jagged terrain with iron bars, rocks, and fists that went on for hours. So just this horrifying scene you can picture. And neither side carried guns. Most of the soldiers killed in the worst fighting between India and China in 60 years. It says most of them lost their footing or were pushed off of the Himalayan ridge, plunging to their deaths. Definitely, I never really knew India. I never really thought of India as a military power, but they might be a big player coming into whatever global conflict we may or may not have in our future.
They could be one of those people I'm scared about. Honestly, I mean, like on the three powers that I'm most scared about getting involved in any kind of world conflict would be first Russia, and second China, and then maybe third India, because China and India have the two largest world populations.
So we've confirmed that either China or India is messing with our broadcast because they don't want to hear what we have to say. So we'll go ahead and touch on one last article here about North Korea. Hopefully they aren't also listening in, and we'll mess with our broadcast as we finish up this last article here. So definitely some pretty crazy things going on in North Korea, and that's something I've been wondering as this whole virus thing has been going around, is what's the situation like with North Korea? Have they been fairly isolated from this, or have they been kind of building up their reserves, waiting for a good time to strike? I don't know really what's going on in North Korea. And I know they're also somewhat aligned with China, another pretty sinister power out there. So a lot of concerning things could potentially happen around that. But it says here, North Korea has blown up a joint liaison office used for talks between itself and South Korea, the latest sign that ties between the two longtime adversaries are rapidly deteriorating. North Korea state media reported that the four-story building, which is located in the town of Kaesong, just north of the demilitarized zone that divides the two Koreas, was completely destroyed by a terrific explosion at 2:50 p.m. A plume of black smoke rising above the site was visible from the South Korean side of the border shortly after. So I haven't seen too much about this. I don't know if they're releasing too much about this or if they're trying to kind of keep this on the down low, but it almost seems like a show of power or more, not necessarily like an attack, but almost like look what we can do, or they specifically blew up that liaison. So it seems like they're trying to send a message about this. What do you guys think?
I think it's wild. I didn't think that things were that tense. I thought that, like, honestly, if anything that I feel like Trump has done kind of well is the fact that, yeah, he actually met with the North Korean leader, which none of our presidents have really been able to do. And like, I thought that there was some, like, negotiations and more peace that was kind of going on between North and South Korea. And then all of a sudden we have a pandemic and Kim Jong Un is dead, and then he's alive, and then he's like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if he's dead or alive anymore. But anyways, and then they all of a sudden they blow up their um the building that they have peace talks in. Like, it blows me away. It's just like, why? Like, I don't know. I don't know, but North Korea has always been a very bipolar country. So
Yeah, and I mean, he talked to North Korea, but now it seems like things are worse than before he talked to him. And the Kim Jong's gone, and the sister seems like an even bigger maniac. It's very strange what's going on there.
Yeah, who knows what's going on? And when everything you hear from Trump basically is, oh, look how awesome I am. Everything I did worked perfectly. They love me over there. Couldn't have gone any better. But, who knows the reality of what happened between whatever he was talking about with Kim Jong-un. And yeah, I remember hearing that he died or something, and then all of a sudden he's back on the scene, but I barely saw anything about it. Definitely in my mind, that's still something that's kind of still up in the air. Who knows what's really going on with that? But we will definitely keep an eye on it here at Partially Impartial. Any of this global news that has to do with any potential wars starting or any global conflicts, we'll be on top of that. So I want to thank all of our listeners for checking us out. Remember to hook us up with a like or subscribe. And we've got Justin and Sheldon now pretty much as fully on the podcast. So they'll be joining us every show that they can. And, we had an excellent conversation this time. So thank you guys for being on the show.
Yep. Look forward to many more, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. This was a good one. Hopefully we don't have technical issues next time. Hopefully maybe less China talk will help.
Just call it China. We'll call it the China virus. Everything's okay. Don't worry about it. I've got it all under control. If we wear masks, everything's going to be fine. But don't wear a mask because it looks stupid.
Geez, have you practiced that, boys?